What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 12. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over each position and break down a couple of my favorite players for this NFL DFS main slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 12. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So I like Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the Buffalo Bills, who have the 12th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Justin Herbert has averaged 26.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.3 rush attempts per game. He scored 31, 22, and 26 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he's only going to be about 4% owned, projected at 21.7 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary and $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, and they have the Chargers trailing by 4.5. So you got a great matchup, a high-scoring game, and a passing game script. So I like Justin Herbert here versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, if you're looking to save some salary at the quarterback position, take a look at Derrick Carr from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Derrick Carr has averaged 18.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3 rush attempts per game. He scored 23 fantasy points last game. He's going to be about 10% owned, projected at 19.4 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's only $5,700 DraftKings salary and $1,400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 3. So fantastic matchup, high scoring game, close competitive game. So I like Derrick Carr here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. I like Josh Jacobs from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 2nd worst defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing running backs, Josh Jacobs has averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 19.9 rush attempts per game and 3.1 pass targets per game. He scored 13, 33, and 14 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he's going to be about 22% owned, projected at 16.5 fantasy points here in Week 12. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary and $800 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 3. So it's a good defensive matchup. Although the Atlanta Falcons have been good versus running backs, I think the Raiders are going to be able to move the ball down the field. Josh Jacobs gets a ton of goal line carries, high scoring game. So I like Josh Jacobs here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, so we got news that Todd Gurley is going to be out for Week 12. So that opens up a value play here at the running back position. So I like Brian Hill from the Atlanta Falcons playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So Brian Hill is going to be the starting running back. He should get around 12 to 15 rush attempts in this game, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here in Week 12, and he's only $4,000 DraftKings salary and $1,100 more on FanDuel. So this is a nice value play that opened up at running back because Todd Gurley is going to be out. So I like Brian Hill, who's got a great matchup here versus the Las Vegas Raiders.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So with Adam Thielen out, I like Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Carolina Panthers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing wide receivers, Justin Jefferson has averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.9 pass targets per game. He scored 18, 25, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He's going to be about 19% owned, projected at 17.1 fantasy points here in week 12. He's 6,300 DraftKings salary and 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game, with the Vikings favored by 3.5. So although it's not a great matchup here, Justin Jefferson should get increased pass targets with Adam Thielen out. So that raises his ceiling and raises his floor. So I like Justin Jefferson here versus the Carolina Panthers. Another wide receiver I like is Robert Woods from the LA Rams playing the San Francisco 49ers, who have a good defense overall, and they've been middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Robert Woods has averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.5 pass targets per game and 2 rush attempts per game. He scored 34, 9, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 15, 6, and 8 pass targets. And he's getting 1 to 2 rush attempts in those games as well. So those rush attempts add to Robert Woods' floor. He could rip off a 30-yard run. He could get a goal line carry. So that adds fantasy value for Robert Woods when he's getting touches in the backfield. He's on the field for 90% of the snaps. He's only going to be about 9% owned, projected at 16 fantasy points here in week 12. And he's only 5,800 DraftKings salary and 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Rams favored by 6.5. So I like Robert Woods here versus the San Francisco 49ers. Now before we move on, I just want to mention a couple of other wide receivers that I like this week. I think Robbie Anderson is a good play. Devontae Parker, Curtis Samuel, he's also getting 2.6 rush attempts per game, and he scored 21, 4, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He's got a great matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings, and he's only 5,100 DraftKings salary and 800 more on FanDuel. So I like Curtis Samuel. Tyler Boyd, he's only going to be about 5% owned, and he's only 5,000 DraftKings salary, 1,900 more on FanDuel. But I love that DraftKings price for Tyler Boyd. He's averaging 16.8 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 18, 10, and 20 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 11, 8, and 7 pass targets. So I like Tyler Boyd here versus the New York Giants. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. I think it's a week that you want to pay up for tight end. So I like Travis Kelsey from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends.
Travis Kelsey has averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9 pass targets per game. Take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 30, 29, and 28 fantasy points off of 10, 12, and 12 pass targets. He's on the field for 86% of the snaps. He's going to be about 23% owned, projected at 18.6 fantasy points here in week 12. He's 7,000 DraftKings salary and 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 56 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 3.5. So high scoring game, close competitive game, ton of volume, excellent production. So I like Travis Kelsey here versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. And the other tight end that I like is Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller has averaged 14.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.3 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 90% of the snaps, and he's also going to be about 23% owned, projected at 16 fantasy points here in week 12. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary and 1,100 more on FanDuel. So fantastic matchup here. I think Derrick, Carr, Josh Jacobs, and Darren Waller make one of the best stacks here in week 12. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Atlanta Falcons.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.